Thank you for having me, Amy. As stated before, my name is Serena, and I am a Canadian researcher. Today I'll be discussing stem cell research in regard to ethics and guidelines. It wasn't until March 2002 that Canada had its own laws to govern stem cell research. Before this, Canada had no guidelines for researchers, ethic boards, or funding agencies on how stem cells should be used and derived. In March 2004, the Act representing assisted human reproduction and related research became law. The Act applies for the derivation of stem cells from human embryos, but does not apply to research using human embryonic stem cell lines that have already been derived. Our Canadian guidelines state that the research that is done needs to benefit Canadians' health, that participants are not paid and informed on how the stem cells are used. Embryos need to be provided voluntarily and with full disclosure of all information relevant to consent. Researchers need to respect confidentiality and privacy of donors, and people who decide to donate tissues or embryos for stem cell research. No payment is to be given for tissues or embryos collected for stem cell research. Embryos should not be created for research purposes, and research needs to respect individual human dignity. Before research can begin, it needs to be approved, and ethical guidelines need to be looked at in order to have funding for the research. Researchers cannot ask fertility treatment members to produce more embryos than needed for reproductive success. All stem cell lines or embryo information has to be anonymized, except for the known fact of donations. Also, physicians that are responsible for fertility treatment or termination of pregnancies cannot be involved in a stem cell research group. In order to use embryos, consent needs to be given and confirmation needs to be given that the embryos are no longer needed for reproductive purposes. No money or healthcare services should be given in exchange for embryos. Use of stem cell lines, germ cell lines, or other lines from other countries can be used as long as it meets the laws and policies of that country. The Stem Cell Committee also needs to look over the process and make sure that the guidelines and policies are met. As a country, Canada continues to lead the way in stem cell research using animal models. There is also a possibility of generating stem cells with properties similar to embryonic stem cells from adult cells, but we still need to look at the ethical issues and make sure that the new research meets the guidelines and policies. As a country, we are always revising and looking over our ethical guidelines and policies. We cannot wait to see what our researchers come up with in the future and to see the benefits that this research will have for us Canadians. Thank you for having me, Amy.